Duke fans, it is good to be back with you. The long-awaited return of the Duke Blue Central podcast. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. So happy and so excited to be talking to you guys again after, admittedly, a longer than extended break between our last couple episodes. Hadn't posted an episode, I believe, in a couple of months. I knew at the end of the season, kind of after a lot of it had wrapped up, I wanted to take a break for a little while, and just several different things happened that kind of extended that break, got in the way of me recording podcasts and recording episodes talking Duke basketball. One of the big ones, of course, is Hurricane Helene, which just hit Western North Carolina, which, if you didn't know, is where I'm located. So that obviously the past few weeks has been occupying the majority of everybody's thoughts around here. All my stuff is good, thankfully. The house is good, place is good, family's good. But obviously the community was hit really hard by the impacts of the hurricane, so that's been on the forefront of everybody's mind here for the past few weeks. So admittedly, sitting down and recording a podcast talking about basketball hasn't been at the top of my priorities right now. But now that we're kind of back to somewhat normalcy, I wanted to get back into this, especially now as the Duke basketball season is beginning to kick off, and we have so many exciting things to talk about. I wish that I could have jumped on here just a few weeks earlier to really start this thing, because we have had some awesome events happen, and some awesome news. Breaking news happen out of Duke basketball in the last couple of weeks that we're going to talk about somewhat briefly here. What the real focus of this episode is going to be is breaking down the scrimmage that just happened between the Duke Blue Devils and the Lincoln Lions out of Pennsylvania. Kind of the ceremonial kickoff to the season after Countdown. But we're going to be breaking down that, as well as briefly going over some other stuff. But I just want to say again, thank you guys for listening and keeping in following with the Twitter page at Duke Blue Central over on Twitter or X. Thanks for following me there, and keeping up with my, I guess, a little more regular tweets than podcast episodes right now. But I want to let you guys know we are back for the regular season. Just to peel back the curtain here, one of my favorite things about doing this podcast is post-game analysis and trying to come to you guys as quickly as I can after each and every game, if I'm able to, just to give you some reactions and thoughts on what we're seeing from Duke this season. That's really what I enjoy the most about this. So as the season approaches, definitely plan to be back in full force, breaking down all things Duke basketball. It is going to be an amazing season to watch this Duke team, as I'm sure you guys know by now, if you've kept up with the team at all. But yeah, okay, all the pleasantries out of the way. I don't know, you guys don't care about my personal life, right? You just want to hear about Duke. I like to think maybe some of you are happy to hear I'm doing all right, but let's get into this. Let's get into the reason why we're talking here today. Okay, to recap some of the massive things that have happened since I've been gone. First thing I'll talk about is Countdown. Countdown, if you're familiar with Duke basketball, you know how it is. It's a scrimmage versus Duke. It's Duke versus Duke, split up into teams. And I, of course, was watching Countdown this season. I missed the player introductions. That was when we were still doing a lot of work around the community with the hurricane and everything like that. But I was able to catch later the full coverage of Countdown. And obviously, Countdown can be a mixed bag of results. We know that there are certain players that seem to really get up for this, and certain players that just seem to let it pass by and let their other teammates shine. We know that, Christian Reeves the past 2 years dominated Countdown, and the talking point was going to be, is Christian Reeves going to be a major part of the Duke team next season? And neither years he was. No disrespect to Reeves, of course, now transferred on to Clemson. Hope he does well there. But Countdown can really be, it's hard to get any serious results from it, other than maybe just getting a first look at some of the freshmen. That's what I kind of look at it as, is, if you've seen a guy play in the regular season, I mean, what are they going to show you in a scrimmage, basically a practice versus their own team? But it's a great opportunity for the freshmen to get used to playing in front of the fans at Cameron. Cameron's obviously an extremely different environment compared to really any other basketball gym in the world. So it's a great opportunity for them to just get used to that, and that's really what you can draw the most from is just looking at the new guys. But this year, I wanted to make just a quick note that it felt to me, even though maybe the box score didn't indicate this, that this was one of the closer, as far as talent gaps go, this was one of the closer years across both teams in Countdown to Craziness that I've watched. Meaning, I felt like either team, both starting fives on the blue white, it felt like every one of those guys made a case for them for uh, them to get playing time on this team. Whether it's a guy like Isaiah Evans or Darren Harris or even an older guy like Mason Gillis, all of them, no matter how far deep you went down on either roster, had their moments in the game, in the scrimmage, I should say, that felt like, man, if he could really pull this off in a regular season game, I could see that guy getting significant minutes. And problem is, all of them did that, which we know that I don't think Duke is maybe ever going to be a team with all the talent we get that plays 10 to 12 guys. It just doesn't seem like that's ever going to happen when you're landing the type of talent we do. Typically, you want those guys on the court as long as possible, and you're not that worried about getting tired. But yeah, but that's really all my thoughts on Countdown that I'm not going to repeat in the scrimmage. Just wanted to highlight really evenly matched, which I think showcases Duke's depth this year. But we'll get into more player breakdowns when we talk about this exhibition that just happened against Lincoln. Another thing I wanted to touch on really quick, and I hate to almost bring this up as like a hey, by the way, but the Boozer twins committed to Duke. I mean, what epic news to come out of high school basketball in the past few weeks. I'll tell you, I never felt confident about this I just never felt confident about this recruiting cycle. I know that obviously their dad Carlos is a Duke legend, but man, if you kept up with that recruiting, it just really looked like the Florida teams had an advantage over Duke when it came to several factors. You know, I think the Florida Gators. It was if you didn't keep up with the race as much, it was really a three-horse race the whole time between Miami, Florida, and Duke. And the Florida Gators, I think, were the first team to kind of get cut from that list. But man, I'll tell you, early in the race, it almost looked to be a two-horse race between Miami and Florida, and really looked like there was a huge potential that both of the twins wanted to stay home in Florida where they live now and kind of play for their hometown, home state schools, and kind of maybe having the desire to go to their own place instead of just following in the footsteps of their dad. So for the longest time, and especially back when Cooper Flagg was in that class, um, even when Cooper Flagg was in the class, he reclassified it obviously on the team this year. Even when he was on the class before, it always felt like Duke was more heavily recruiting Cooper Flagg than the Boozer twins, which always to me signified that, perhaps they knew they really wanted Flagg. Maybe they didn't have as much of a chance at landing both of them, so they had to pick one. I'm not sure that's exactly how it went down, but I'm sure Cooper Flagg reclassifying to this year massively helped Duke's chances in recruitment just because, him and Cameron Boozer play the same position, have similar styles of game, both kind of do it all power forwards. Cameron's a little bit more of a physical specimen, kind of a bruiser. Cooper's has a lot more finesse to his game, but regardless, the closer it got to their commitment date, the more it looked like Duke was in a really good position to land them. And then before you know it, you look up and now it's Duke commits Cameron and Caden Boozer. And man, we are going to be spoiled as Duke fans over the next few seasons. To have a kid like Cooper Flagg on your team, who we're going to talk about a lot in this episode, And then, he's leaving obviously at the end of the year. He's a one and done guy. Probably going to be is a huge betting favorite to be the number one pick in the NBA draft. To go from that to next year having a guy like Cameron Boozer, who for a long time was considered to be the number one pick in next year's draft. I think AJ Dybance, another great high school recruit, maybe has surpassed him in that. I think it's close, but to go from a kid like Flagg to a kid like Cameron Boozer to just elite team leading freshmen year after year. And they also happen to play the same position. So that's going to be interesting to compare their 2 years after we look back kind of on these 2 years at Duke. Hopefully we're looking at just 2 national championships in a row with 2 great freshmen. What a story that would be. A guy can wish, right? And oh, by the way, not only did we get Cameron, the number 2 rated recruit, we also got his brother Caden, who, not too shabby himself, is I believe number 30 about in ESPN or 24/7. But both of them are, I would call, elite high school players. Cameron, I'd say his biggest NBA comp is a guy Duke fans should be familiar with, Paolo Banchero. That's who I think 24/7 Sports related him to, his playing style. He's kind of that big forward that can handle the ball and even play make for his team. Really smart, really high IQ players, both of them. Caden is potentially considered to be. I'm not 100% convinced he's also going to be a one and done. I don't know if he wants that or not. But it's just one of those kind of like leader point guards, always makes the right play, puts his team in the right position, really mature. He's a talented ball handler. He plays good defense, is also a few inches shorter than his brother Cameron, but is also really muscular for his age, really big. They're fun to watch right now. If you haven't tuned into some high school games, they're on some of the top teams, both in kind of school and then in other teams that they're on. Really recommend watching some footage of them. We might be, breaking down maybe going deeper into what their recruiting means for next year's Duke team at some point later in the future. But let's focus on this year's team. So now that we're kind of into the episode, briefly wanted to touch on those 2 topics. Let's talk about the scrimmage. So if you didn't have a chance to tune in, Duke played an exhibition game at Cameron. Let's see, a couple days ago, the 19th of October in the afternoon, against the Lincoln Lions, an HBCU school from Pennsylvania. They were a Division II champion. I think they're the conference champions in Division II. So a Division II team, an older team, but not a bottom of the barrel Division II team. But obviously, this is a team with not nearly as much talent or experience playing at a high level as many of these Duke guys, but hey, a lot of our guys are freshmen as well. So the final score of the game, in case you didn't catch it, ended up being 107-56 in favor of Duke. So obviously a real barn burner here. But for the first few minutes, Lincoln did a pretty good job of keeping it close. I think they were hitting some absolute like circus shot threes and mid-range jumpers where you're looking up at like, hey, that play was pretty well defended, but it banked off the glass and went in. But still, I mean, it was 56-34 at the end of the first half. 51-22 was the second half. Duke winning by a similar margin, even better in the second half. For a total of 107-56. They ended up shooting 34% from the field, 25% from 3, only 1 for 7 from 3. Duke, on the other hand, obviously had a great day of offense. We ended up shooting, what was it, 50% or 52% from the floor across the whole game, 40% from 3. That was 33% in the second half. The first half, they could absolutely not miss threes. We shot 47% from 3 in the first half. By the way, 5 of those coming from Con Knipple, who's another guy we're going to talk about a lot because, oh boy, does it look like we have a diamond in the rough in our hands in him. He is a guy who, I'll be the first to admit, was not familiar with his game. The memes, Con, I was not familiar with your game. but you're about to wake the whole country up with your game, in my prediction. Yeah, but hey, with that, let's get into just breaking down some of the players here. So, first thing, odd starting lineup for this scrimmage. I think if you're on Duke Twitter at all, or even if you not on it, you're a fan of Duke, you just watched last year, I think you have in your head a loose starting lineup of this year. And I'm sure maybe the first name you think about starting is Tyrese Proctor. Tyrese Proctor didn't start in this game. Um, Now, I want to be the first to say I do not think that the starting lineup that was rolled out for the scrimmage is the starting lineup. And Tyrese Proctor ended up playing the second most minutes as far as guards go. But the starting lineup was as follows: it was Sion James, the transfer from Tulane, the super senior who I was admittedly am still very excited about. At the two guard spot, Caleb Foster started, who was maybe the best player at Countdown. It seemed like he was a leading scorer, was just electric there. Toned it down a little bit here in this exhibition, but nevertheless, he was the starting two guard. At the three, Con Knipple, the freshman. At the four, Cooper Flagg, you know who he is. And then at five, we started Malik Brown. So, two guys I think that everybody had kind of penciled into the starting lineup with Kamon Malawach, the freshman from South Sudan, and Tyrese Proctor did start in this game. Now, again, I'll say it again. I do not think that this is the starting lineup, even for the beginning of the season. I do think there's a chance Malawach is not starting at the beginning of the year. I'm pretty confident. I would say I'm pretty confident he'll be starting. Come 2025, come January, February, March of next year. I think Malawach will have earned his way into the starting center spot from there, especially with just the way this team is composed. It's not like we have, we don't have a ton of natural centers that are competing with him for that spot. Especially with an injury to the freshman Pat Ngongba that, I've heard some people throwing out some rumors he might even medically redshirt for a season. Who knows? But nevertheless, I think Malawach will be starting. But it wasn't for this game. Different guys that could have been matchup dependent or maybe just Shire messing around with different things in an exhibition. But that was the big thing to start the game. And then, as the game developed, I think it became clear who Duke's kind of go-to guys are for this season for scoring. And it looks like we got a lot of them. And just to highlight, let's start with some player breakdowns with the guy everybody wants to hear about, which is Cooper Flagg. Countdown, he had a good performance, but you just never know how that's going to translate to a real game. This exhibition is much more. I mean, it's officiated like a real game. It essentially is a real game. You're just playing a team with, far less competition than you. And Cooper Flagg opened the scoring and also led us in scoring. So his final stat line, he finished with 24 minutes played, keep in mind, finished with 22 points, only 2 rebounds, but 6 assists, 4 blocks with only 1 turnover. Oh, and he was also 50% from the field, shooting 8 for 16 and 2 for 5 on his 3-point attempts. Just an incredible line from Cooper Flagg, and it's apparent from the tip that this is a different guy that's showing up, in Countdown. When the action's on, he's a different player, and he showed that a bunch in the exhibition. From the first play of the game, he opened us in scoring by backing a guy down in the post and hitting a little turnaround jumper. It was clear that Cooper was going to get what he wanted in this game on offense and defense. It's hard to describe Cooper Flagg's game because it just feels like he does everything really well. And I'm not just talking about scoring. I'm talking about passing. I'm talking about defense. I'm talking about quickness and anticipation for steals and getting deflections in passing lanes, communicating with his teammates. It feels like this guy was just born to play basketball, and then he's almost got that. You don't want to say LeBron-esque, but that kind of playmaking mentality while also being 6'9" and being a physically imposing presence. Now, he's a skinny kid. He's also 17. which is just insane. Think about what you were doing when you were 17. Cooper Flag is out here against grown men, getting 6 assists and 4 blocks and 22 points in a collegiate basketball game. Just insane stuff from him. I heard one journalist say the word to describe his game is just effortless, and after this, you can really see why. It just feels like he glides across the court, and it just nothing looks difficult. Now I know this was inferior talent. Don't get me wrong. No disrespect to Lincoln, of course. Those guys are still great basketball players. But it just felt like he could get whatever he wanted whenever he wanted. His 3 point jumper looks good, which was, I think, I mean, if you were going to pick a weakness to his game, is it the outside shooting? But even that, I mean, just with how easily he gets to the basket, he's always going to have open threes in every game. There's no way that with everything else he can do, people are going to be that worried about him on the perimeter, and he's going to get those shots. He made threes today. He made 2 threes. I think one was open, one was a little more contested. I think he had one of them was a step back. I mean, how many 6'9" guys can dribble the ball up the court and hit a step back three? It's just it's just I don't know. It's hard to talk about his game because he just does so many things well. It's when you're talking about a guy like a Zion or like a Jahlil Okafor, if you remember him in 2015, it's almost easier to talk about their game because they have just huge parts of their game that are so far above everybody else, and even the average fan can see it. Zion, you could look at him and say that is the most athletic player I've ever seen in college. And he's throwing down huge 360 dunks, and he was unstoppable in the post, and he had like perfect games where he would just back people down. He was stronger than everybody else, even as a freshman, like just weighed more than everybody else as a big athletic power forward. And it was easy to see that. He also could shoot. I mean, he shot the outside shot pretty well. But it was easy to see. Same thing with a guy like Okafor. When you're looking at his game and breaking down his game, it was all about the post. It was all about getting the ball to him down in the low post and letting him go to work, and he was unstoppable there. With Cooper Flag, it's just different. It's hard to say what to do against him on defense, and it's hard to say how to stay out of his way, when he's defending you. Now look, high school defenders are always going to have to adjust when they come to college. That's a big jump, even more so than offense. But he's going to adjust quickly. I mean, he had 4 blocks in this game, and some of them were just ridiculous Zion level blocks where he's coming out of nowhere from behind. He had one block where he pinned a guy's shot on the backboard where it felt like he wasn't even in the frame in the play, and then all of a sudden huge chase down block, and those type of things. Those high effort plays, those winning plays are going to inspire the rest of this team to just get after it, and you could see it out there. I mean, like, and he's so unselfish. I don't think he ever once just had like a dribble drive ISO possession where he just. I think he had one mid range contested shot that I would say, like, not necessarily a bad shot for him, but if like somebody else takes that shot, I'm like, oh, come on, you could have passed out of that. I think he had one of those in the whole game. And by the way, I mean, when you're a star player like him, you can take some of those. Like, Paolo took a lot of those, and I was fine with it because he was Paolo. Same thing with Cooper. But I think he had one of those the entire game where I was like, and it went in, by the way, where it was like, that was like a star player move where you're grabbing the ball and get out of the way. I'm making the shot. But he so many times he found open teammates. I mean, he led the team in assists in this game with 6. The next closest had 3, and that's tough to do in a game where you're only playing 24 minutes. And the kind of whole purpose of the game is to like get everybody in playing some minutes. We're going to have a ton of stat lines for Cooper Flag where he's got 20 points, like 5 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 blocks, 2 steals. Like, it's just, it's a, yeah, he's going to have a lot of like 20, 5, 5, 5, 5s. he could have a game where I could see a game for Cooper where he has 18 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, 5 blocks, 5 steals. Like it's like that's not out of the question for him, which just sounds absurd. Um, yeah. But we can move on to a different player. But I could talk about Cooper Flag's ability. It's just it's hard to talk about how good he is and how good he feels like he's going to be. Now, listen, let's get him against some high level opponents. That's when you're really going to see maybe maybe some errors or flaws in his game. Nobody's a perfect player. But man, I mean, the eye test tells you so far he's going to be he will be the college player everyone's expecting him to be. Next guy, I think that made it like a huge jump in my mind was Nipple. Like I said, um, if you were going to look at this freshman class coming in and who you were most excited for, Cooper was obviously number one. Everybody, he's the guy. But after that, I would wager to say most people were talking about Isaiah Evans next in line. He was the next highest rated freshman recruit. Um, he kind of had, I guess, more high school pedigree, things like that. A state champion in North Carolina. Nipple played in Wisconsin. Um, but it's like I didn't hear that much about Khan. I felt like as we should have, and there were spurts of him being really good, like at Peach Jam. I remember. I think at the Peach Jam he led like every scorer in the country for points. Um, but man, Khan is a scorer, dude. Like if you were looking for a Jared McCain replacement for this season, as far as playing style, I think Khan's and Jared's personalities might could not be more different in the best way. They both seem like awesome guys. But but if you're looking for a McCain replacement, this is the guy you're going to watch because he's even a little bit more physical. I think he probably weighs more and is bigger than Jared McCain. He has the same tenacity to get rebounds. He had 5 rebounds in this game. For a guy who's, I guess he's considered a forward or two, he'll float around that kind of wing guard, two guard position. And it's tough on this year's team because everyone on Duke is 6'5" or over, so it's like they all could be forwards in some sense. But Khan just it seems like he's impressed the players the most and surprised the players the most coming into practices this year. And he's definitely surprised me the most. He was electric in this game. He hit 5 threes all in the first half. It felt like he couldn't miss. So he finished with a stat line of 17 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists. Um, yeah, just if this is going to be a fun year. I mean, it's going to be watching Cooper Flag break down a guy and then send a dime pass to Khan in the corner to knock down a three is never going to get old, and that is going to be a combo that a lot of teams are going to hate to see. And I think Khan has like all but earned his starting spot in the roster. If you're looking at the eye test, I mean, he played 25 minutes. That was the most of any player on Duke in this game, including more than Cooper Flag, more than Tyrese Proctor, more than Caleb Foster. Um, yeah, I mean, the whole talk around the offseason, and I'm sure we'll talk about it a ton this year, is minutes allocation. Um, I'm not a huge I don't necessarily have to see 3 guard lineups like we did last year, where you were running out Jeremy Roach, Tyrese Proctor, and Jared McCain. I think that worked fine, but I was kind of looking forward to this year, maybe getting back to a little bit more traditional of a 2 guard lineup with a wing. I kind of want to play Cooper at the wing, but you can play him so many different places. But I mean, when you it's like I have a good feeling Proctor and Foster are going to start being older guys who have earned it. It's not like they haven't earned it, but when you've got a guy like Khan, a freshman at this level that looks to be, Jared McCain-esque in his shooting, also really physically strong. Defense, I think he's got a ways to go there, but when you're surrounded by as many good defenders as this team as we have, that's something that can improve for him a lot. And it also helps. Like it, if you just have one kind of weak defender on your team and the rest are really good, it's not as much of a weakness because they can make up for him. Not that I think he's a bad defender. I think that's probably the area of his game that's going to grow the most. It's not for a lack of effort. He's got as much hustle as anybody on this team, and it seems to be as much work ethic as anybody on this Duke roster. But Khan was electric in this game. He had one putback dunk, which was maybe the play, which pretty much was the play of the game, where I think somebody else missed a shot. Malawach came up with a big offensive rebound and kind of backdoor passed it to a cutting Khan, who dunked all over a Lincoln defender who I just had no clue Khan had that in his bag. And I think Cooper Flagg got more excited about that dunk than Con Kniffle did. Go back and watch that highlight if you haven't. I'm sure you've seen it. If you've been on Duke social media at all, you've seen it. But Con and Cooper just looked to be an electric duo. You know, there were a lot of us that I think sat back and went through the what ifs of like, man, imagine Cooper Flagg getting to kick it out to a Jared McCain. And it's like, I don't know what this season's going to hold for Con, but it looks like we have a guy like Jared McCain that Cooper's going to be able to kick it to. And I did not anticipate that going into the season with him. I don't think I was aware of how good of a shooter he was. And the stroke looks good too. It's not like these are banking in off the backboard and the shot looks ugly. Both of these guys, but especially Khan, just he quick release. He shoots over defenders, and his size helps him with that. He's not afraid. He can get inside if he wants to, which is going to open up his 3-point game more. It's just, yeah, game looked effortless for him out there too. And boy, are we, yeah, we're going to see a lot of games where Cooper and Khan together are just going off, and I couldn't be more excited to watch that. Yeah. Oh, and by the way, the announcer a couple times. It is Con Knipple, by the way. It's kind of spelled like Knuppel, pronounced Knipple. Announcer several times in the scrimmage was going. He was saying when Con was shooting it, he was saying Knipple for the triple, and that might catch on. That's an electric nickname and an electric announcer call, and I think we're gonna hear a lot of Knipple for triple, and then a lot of Duke fans celebrating after that because of how many times I think they're going to go in. All right, moving on to the rest of the guys. I am admittedly going to focus a little bit more on the younger guys in this episode and the transfers because we've seen the elder, like for Caleb Foster, for example. I would say Caleb had his best showing. He finished with 8 points. He didn't shoot the ball that well. He made a 3. He had an assist, had a steal. This wasn't the game for me to showcase all of Caleb Foster's talents and skills. I think we know what he can bring to the table with his driving and his shooting and his playmaking ability. I'm excited about Caleb, and we'll break down kind of more of his performances once we get into playing time, seeing how that minutes allocation is going. It's worth highlighting he played 22 minutes of this game, which was a big chunk. He was one of the most played guys, and I think that's going to continue into the season. But Caleb wasn't kind of a key piece of this game, I guess you could say. And there are going to be games, by the way, where all of these players I talk about, they might not be a key feature of that game. This Duke team is really deep, really talented. Sometimes your number's not going to get called on a night-to-night basis. Caleb wasn't, his number wasn't gets called as much today, and or not today, but when they played. So that's not a big deal. Still had a good game. I think it's going to be interesting to watch. Does he kind of like disappear amongst all this talent, or is he a guy who's going to fit in well? I have confidence he will. I think he's a spurt scorer. I think if he gets a hot hand and gets driving downhill and gets that shot going, we saw it against Michigan State last year. He's a guy that can put up 10, 15 points on you in a hurry. And I think that might be his role on this team, is just kind of, when the offense starts to lull amidst those kind of scoring droughts, look for him to have a hot hand and kind of just play through him at parts of the game. On to the next, we had a transfer that I wanted to highlight, Malik Brown. And his stat sheet, he finished with 4 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 steals, 7 points. Look for that to be a common stat line for him. Or excuse me, 4 rebounds, 3 assists. Yeah, 3 steals. Yeah, I was looking at somebody else, but look for that to be a common stat line. Maybe with just more rebounds for him. He ended up only playing 19 minutes of this game, um, but he's just a guy who just like I really like watching play. He's a physically imposing guy. He is awesome at anticipating steals. He led the ACC in steals last year for Syracuse. In case you weren't aware. Um, I'm really excited to have him not only for this year, but the coming years. I think we got 2 years of him left. He's just a guy I think that you could plug into any lineup and they get better. He's a guy who's going to live on putback dunks and layups and alley oops. And it's going to be fun to watch. He's not a guy that needs the ball. Just hustle guy, really good defender. He was, I believe, he was all ACC defense this past season, well deserved. Um, was by far and away, I think, the best, or maybe not, but he was one of the two best players on Syracuse last season, and it's a privilege to have him at Duke this year. Where I think he's just an easy guy to play. I think he's I guess kind of that Mark Williams type, but bigger, more physically imposing, less focused about outside shooting and scoring, more focused on doing the dirty work in the post, getting putbacks and flushing them home. And I don't think he's going to get enough credit this year. I think there's easily a position where he's either start. I think he will start in the center position to start the year, but I even think later when Malawach kind of assumes that role, I think he'll be very quickly off the bench, if not one of the first two. And his minutes are going to be really important because he's kind of him and Malawach, I think, are going to be our only guys really manning that 5 position, unless we go small ball and put Cooper there, which I think is an option. Probably matchup dependent, and what's the state of the game? Are we ahead or behind? Type thing. But his minutes are going to be important. Him and Malawach working together, and playing when the other one is off the court, it's going to be good to watch. But but yeah, just a hard worker. He was perfect from the field. I think he's going to have a lot of games where he's perfect. He's not a guy who forces a shot pretty much ever. But there are days where he has really high scoring totals. Just look at when Syracuse came to Cameron last year. He was the player for Syracuse that game, and it's going to be fun to watch. Sion James, admittedly, had kind of like a less highlight performance in this one than I thought he would. But look, I mean, especially as a guard, when you have the ball in your hands a lot, when you transfer, it's going to be tougher to kind of meld into that offensive style. He did get into foul trouble today. He picked up 4 personal fouls, which with how many weapons this team has, we can afford a guy to play really aggressive. And it partly paid off for me. He ended up with 2 steals himself, 3 assists and 6 rebounds. That guy is huge too. Another really awesome defender from the guard position. I think if you wanted an all defense lineup from Duke, he would be in it. If you're Shire and you're calling a timeout for offense defense, I think your lineup would probably be Tyrese Proctor, Sion James, Cooper Flagg, Malik Brown, and Common Malawach. And good luck, like good luck scoring on that team, because all of those guys are like crazy defensive-minded dudes that can get a steal and get a block and switch like crazy. Other than Malawach, but switch like crazy, guard you at the perimeter. Yeah, good luck with that. But I do anticipate it might take him a minute to kind of figure out his spot on this team. Finished with 7 points on the day. He did hit 1 3, which is going to be important for him this season. Can he space the floor? Shire has made it continually, emphasize that he wants Duke to space the floor this year. I think he knows they have to do that because if they can't, opposing defenses are just going to wall up the paint and not give Cooper Flagg as much room to play down there. And if you don't have shooters on the outside who can make you pay, that can be a losing formula sometimes. Now, I don't think we'll have a problem. Like we just talked about. I mean, we shot 40% from 3 total today, almost 50% in one half. I don't think this is a team where you can wall up the paint and let us shoot from the outside. Too many guys can beat you. but it's going to be worth watching. Is Sion James one of those guys that can beat you? I think he can be. I obviously don't think that's the main purpose of his game. He is absolutely a driver. If you look at like his shot chart over the years, he is either a 3-point or right at the basket type shot guy, and I love that. But it will take a minute to see like how he fits in with the other guards. He's a very different guard than every other guard on this team, referring to like Tyrese Proctor, Caleb Foster, even other guys like Darren Harris, who I guess are kind of guards. He's just very different. He's a defense first. He's a physical. He's a driver. He's a get to the free throw line. A lot of the other guys are more finesse and step backs and shooting. He's a different type of guard, and thus, when he's on the floor, Duke is going to play a little bit differently, and that'll be fun to watch. Proctor off the bench looked really good in this game. He went 5 for 7, 50% on his threes, 2 for 4, made all but one free throw, finished with 3 rebounds, 3 assists, 1 steal. Look, I mean, I've been high on Proctor for a minute. I think he had some subpar performances in big games last year. I think he'd be the first to tell you that. But man, he looked aggressive in this game, and I want to see more of that. I want to see, I want to see Cooper Flagg and Tyrese Proctor, at the top of the scoring sheet a lot of nights, up there with Con Knipple as well. If those can be your top 3 scorers, along with Caleb Foster, then I think Duke's in a good position. Those guys can reliably score. If your top scorers in order are like Cooper Flagg, Con Knipple, Caleb Foster and Tyrese Proctor kind of going back and forth, I think Duke's in a good position. Those are kind of 4 guys who I think are going to lead, like drastically carry the scoring haul for Duke this season. The other guys can kind of supplement, but on a consistent night-to-night basis, I think those are going to be the guys that are filling up the stat sheet from a points perspective. And Proctor looked great. Proctor had all of his moves. He looks really athletic this season. How often have we had a 3-year point guard at Duke? We've been spoiled with, him and Jeremy Roach over the past few seasons, but Proctor's been running the point now at Duke for, I guess 2.5 years. He took over kind of halfway into his freshman year. But yeah, awesome stuff from him. We know what to expect from Tyrese. I'm excited to watch him play. All right, next young guy we got to talk about is Isaiah Evans, the guy I think most people maybe expected to be the second most active freshman on this team behind Cooper Flagg, and he only gets 10 minutes today, less minutes than Darren Harris even. Now, he made good advantage of him, made 2 of his 4 threes, looked pretty good. I think, look, I mean, if we can be honest here, the biggest thing that'll hold, I think, Evans back this season is just his size. He is a real skinny dude. Now, we've seen Brandon Ingram's before come through Duke and torch, and I think, a couple games this year wouldn't surprise me if we throw him in there, and he ends up with 15 points in like 10 minutes. But I think his size and his defensive ability could potentially hold him back from getting rotation minutes on this year's team. Not to say I think he's a guy we could look at coming back next year and really tearing it up. But I think there's definitely a spot for him on this year's team. It's just depending on how deep this team wants to go, and how much are we really going to value defense, and can he cut it out there against, let's say older wings that are, going to have a significant size advantage on him. So it's kind of, the book's still out on it for me, but I think it was notable that he was getting a lot less burn than some of the other guys. Darren Harris is another guy that looked good. I would love for these guys to like kind of be the guys that we're excited about at the end of this year, that we're excited about them leading the team next year, along with some of the other guys on this team. We've got a lot of guys on this team that could come back realistically. But I hope that at the end of the year we're looking back and saying like, man, Darren Harris, Isaiah Evans might not have gotten as much burn this year as you like, but they showed flashes of being great, and I can't wait for them to get all they want and more next season. And lead a team that's going to have another star freshman on it. But Harris looked good, man, too. Hit 2 for 3 on his threes. Physically looked good. I know he had an injury earlier in the year. Looked good there. Looked like he fit. Just another guy the book's kind of out on how much is he going to play. Next guy I want to talk about is Malawach. Common Malawach, big center from South Sudan, number 3 rated recruit, I think, on 24/7 going into this season. And you can definitely tell, he is going to have a huge role on this team. Uh, he had 11 rebounds in 20 minutes. And it was probably even less than that. I think I looked up at one point and he had played for felt like 10 minutes and had 10 rebounds already, 2 blocks with that. He is Duke fans for the past seasons before Flip came into town, before Flip came back for this last season, we were kind of spoiled with like big, dominant, paint dominant big men that were just like rebounding machines and blocking machines with Mark Williams and Derek Lively. I think we've got that again and come on Malawach. And I think his game even has some levels that those guys didn't have. I think offensively, I think he can do more than those guys did, at least initially. Mark Williams really came on late in his sophomore year, even late in his freshman year. And then Derek Lively obviously only stayed 1 year, but kind of like established his role towards the end of the year in that dunker spot. And yeah, Derek Lively was just so cool because he affected the game so much, like without scoring at all. Um, but Malawach can score. I mean, he took a 3 in this game. He made a 3 at countdown. I think he will shoot them if he's open this year, and he always will be. But he's another guy who just crowds the paint. He has a huge wingspan. Is going to get a ton of blocks this season. Is absolutely, I think, going to lead the team in rebounding. That's, I'd say right now, the biggest strength from his game is boards. It felt like at times it was cheating to have him on the court. Now there were a few times where, it felt like he got the rebound, didn't come down with the ball strong enough. Part of that could be due to his hand injury. But part of that also is just going to come with experience of knowing what to do with the ball after you get the offensive board. He made a couple good passes today. One we talked about earlier, the great backdoor cut pass to Khan, which led to a big highlight dunk, which he was also excited about. Was his only assist to the game, but I think the more he develops, the more scary that guy's going to get, because I think unlike a lot of these just big defensive centers that come into college, I think he actually does have an offensive game we haven't seen a lot of yet. I think he does have back to the basket moves. I think he has post, maybe not post moves like fadeaways and stuff like that. I think he has facing the basket moves we haven't seen. And he is an absolute menace in the pick and roll on a lob threat. He had a big dunk out of the pick and roll pass from Tyrese Proctor. I'm sure Proctor is absolutely going to love having him, as the screener rolling to the basket. Man, it's going to be tough to stop, especially when you got all these other weapons on the team. But I was really pleased with what I saw with Malawach, and even at the beginning of the year, if he's nothing but a putback dunker and an elite rebounder, it will do so much for this team. This team is way too good offensively to have any extra offensive possessions, and if we get them, we will not lose a lot of games. Because I think this is going to be a pretty good shooting team from the outside and a pretty efficient team at scoring. Duke had a ton of, I think Duke had a lot of assists in this game. I know it's just a scrimmage, but it's like compared to Lincoln, right? They had 8 assists in the entire game on 23 made baskets. Duke had 25 assists of 37 made baskets. And that's not even counting like into the game. So like 25 assists in this game. So unselfish. So that leads me to believe that this Duke team is going to just efficiently score the basketball. We'll work on a defense, but scoring I think will come. That being said, if the times we're missing, teams cannot afford to give us another chance, because I bet more than likely than not we're making it. And he is going to give us a lot of extra chances in the game, extra possessions. And then on the defensive side, if he's on the low post, especially with Cooper Flagg also hanging around, I don't think you're getting the ball back if you miss a shot. He's that good of a rebounder, I think, and that'll only get better. But I think naturally he is just he suctions the ball up down there in the post, and you saw it very quickly. So yeah, I think he's going to be key. Mason Gillis, next guy, kind of the last guy I want to talk about. The other guys who played were walk-ons. Spencer Hubbard had an and one basket, which was crazy. I think Cameron went louder for that than anything. But Mason Gillis, if you don't know, transferred from Purdue, was the Big Ten Sixth Man of the Year. He's really known as a 3-and-D guy. He's a big power forward type wing player, small forward, power forward, kind of play wherever. Really good defensive guy, really good three-point shooter. He's a 40% career three-point shooter. Very hard to do, especially for a guy that's played as many years in college as he has. I think last year his total numbers were about 47% from three. He actually missed all his threes in the scrimmage, but so that's an element of his game that we didn't get to see. But there's going to be games where he hits 5 threes. I think, what was it? He had a game, I think, at Purdue last season where I think he hit 9 threes in a game or something, 7 to 9 threes. We could easily see another one of those performances where he's just a flamethrower from outside. But he actually played 19 minutes, more minutes than I was expecting from him. I think he kind of prides himself on being the ultimate glue guy, just making everything fit together. And I can't imagine like his seniority. He played in the national championship game last year, for goodness sake. His advice is going to go a long way in these Duke huddles. And I think, regardless of his stat sheet, if the scoring is coming as easy as I think it will, and maybe we don't need as much of scoring threats on the court, his veteran leadership is going to provide a lot for Duke. And we'll see how much playing time that translates to. I think there's a world in which, he's the second or third guy coming off the bench, and I think there's a world in which he doesn't come off. He's a little bit deeper in the rotation and is more of a, that coach on the bench, like Duke has had in years past. I think that's less likely. I don't think he would have transferred here if he would have thought, I'm not going to play. I think he'll definitely play over the likes of guys like Isaiah Evans and Darren Harris. So there's definitely a role for him on this team, and I think his leadership's going to be invaluable as the team gets deeper into the season and hopefully deep into a tournament run. But yeah, no, this has been a long episode, but those are kind of my general thoughts on everything that's happened within Duke over the past few weeks, and especially highlighting the scrimmage. Going to be a fun year, folks. So we're excited to give you breakdowns of the games. We're going to be back with you. Duke plays another scrimmage, I believe, Saturday against Arizona State. Bobby Hurley returning to Cameron as a coach this time. That's going to be a better test of this team playing, obviously a higher level Division I opponent, seeing how they play there. That game's going to be televised, I think, on ESPN, or ACC Network Extra. As this one was, unless I'm getting that wrong. But we'll be, at the very latest, hopefully getting you that on Saturday or over the weekend, the breakdown of that. But yeah, thanks for sticking with me, even with the long extended podcast break. I hope you guys are finding this episode and enjoying it, and I hope you tune in for another awesome year of Duke basketball and breakdowns here at Duke Blue Central. Thank you guys so much for listening. Go Blue Devils.